it's good to be back after a 2-week break. And here we are, 2 weeks into the new year. Our armed forces are engaged in another military action, as well as Ukraine, of course. Thousands of protesters take over the streets of central London. I passed many of them on my way here. And another institution of this country causes another horrific miscarriage of justice. Meanwhile, politicians can't bring themselves to say sorry. Waiting lists remain stubbornly and dangerously high. Oh, and Labour go full head on for the nanny state. Oh joy, why bother with all that New Year, Happy New Year sentiment? It really is the case that nothing has changed. But on the other hand, I did look for some good news. Well, depends which perspective it is. The good news could be the economy has a pretty good chance of avoiding recession, unlike our EU neighbours. Well, that's something to be cheerful about. Oh yes, and a small matter of 60 elections taking place around the world this year, including, of course, here in the UK. Does that fill you with joy? Or as Brenda from Bristol once said, oh, not another one. Let's, however, brace ourselves for an afternoon of thought-provoking chat where your thoughts, your ideas, your views make this programme what it is, along with, of course, my cracking guests. But I have a question for you, and I think it's a slightly more sort of nuanced question than we've been asking today about what's been going on in the Red Sea. And I'm looking at our conflicts that the UK is involved in. And I'm asking this simple question: how involved should the UK be in global conflict? You know, we'll all have views about the rights and the wrongs of each of the two main conflicts, of course, which are in the Red Sea and in Ukraine. And I strongly back the action in both. But we are Britain. We are second fiddle to the US power, which is leading the military engagement in Yemen. We actually have provided some of our Navy and 4 tornadoes in action. None of the other countries who supported it have, to the best of my knowledge, provided military action. Is that something we should be doing? It is, after all, many would say, and I would agree, in our national interest to do so. And we've just agreed to support another $2.5 billion to Ukraine in the fight for freedom against Russian aggression. You may disagree with that perspective. So hence my question: how involved should the UK be in global conflict? 03444 499 1000. You know me, I take your calls as soon as I can. You can tweet me at Nick Dubois or at TalkTV. But I mentioned cracking guests. And the first one to join me during this hour to cover that and much more news is Roger Gewolb, who I could describe, Roger, as business, finance and CEO, political expert and former advisor to the Treasury, former advisor to Number 10, the Bank of England. I mean, come on, where does it end? Let me ask you this.
Good
Roger.
afternoon.
Well, that's kind of you to say so. That we got off to a good start. How involved should the UK be in global conflict, do you think?
It depends. I think it depends on the conflict. A localized conflict somewhere in Africa or South America, there's all sorts of those that we needn't be involved in. But I think the conflicts that you mentioned, I think in the Middle East and Ukraine, we absolutely have to be involved in, because, to put it very bluntly, if we aren't, we're going to be next. These are all part of, I've just come back from the States, where I've been visiting with some of the world's, I think, most top geopolitical experts. And as a so-called geopolitical expert myself, I was very interested in their views. So, I mean, I've met with a former ambassador, a former CIA bureau chief, people like that, the editor of the largest newspaper in the United States, people who really understand their geopolitics. And every one of them is saying the same thing. Putin is behind all of this. This is all about Putin with Iran, with China. So Yemen, the Houthis, Hamas, Gaza, Ukraine, it's all part of an orchestrated program that Putin is running.
So is it perhaps cruder but more accurate to say, because we use the words geopolitics rightly, and in the context you talk about, absolutely right, But is it more a case of it's in our national interest? So down in the Yemen, they block the Red Sea, 15% of world trade goes through there, that pushes up prices, and we go on another inflation spiral. Or in Ukraine, we'd be, less than 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles from the Russians on the front if they took over Ukraine? That's in our national interest.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, anybody out on the street protesting against these things, in my view, with respect, is grievously wrong. Taking your first example, the Red Sea, the Straits of Hormuz, it's 15% of world shipping. I mean, that's an extraordinary amount. Nobody is immune from that. It's between 20 and 25% of world oil. Same thing. We are going to see our oil prices shooting up. I've been asked.
They've started to move already, haven't
4%.
they? Yeah.
I was asked on another program earlier today for my prediction. I don't think oil's 75 to 80, depending. Texas West is 75 and the other is 80, and I don't see them moving much above 90 or 95. So I hopefully won't reach crisis point, but you never know.
Well, but where does this go? Because I think it's linked. I mean, okay, so we agree, and I'll be very interested in what viewers and listeners think of this. So do call me 0344 499 1000. I will take your calls as soon as I can, which will be soon. But let me ask you this: where does we've started something now. At what point do we say enough? We've kind of said to the Houthis now, well, you see, we drew a red line. You've been attacking our ships. You haven't done what we said. We've sent missiles in and we've bombed you. But this is how they all start, isn't it? With a limited action and escalate.
The geopolitical experts that I spoke with feel that this is all part of Putin's plan. And that actually we had no choice, but we have played into the hands of Putin and Iran by attacking. They wanted us to. They want this to escalate. Exactly why what's meant to happen next in their playbook is not clear to anybody.
But Putin wants to destabilize all of the world so he can further his own ambition. I'll tell you what, Roger, as powerful as your thoughts are, I keep promising people I'm going to take calls. The lines are already flashing away.
Sure.
Let's go and join Heather from Scotland. Hello, Heather. Heather, hello. Oh, right. So, in fact, when they said they had Heather from Scotland, it was not true at all. So we will come back to your words of wisdom.
Well, his playbook is said to be certainly to restore Mother Russia to its former glory, but also he is aligned with the mullahs in Iran and others to rid the West of its, quote, satanic, unquote, ways. Now, it may not work. We may be corrupt and rotten to the core in many ways, but it's a heck of a lot better than what they've got, and it's the best thing we have. So, I mean, the man on the street is going to be affected by this if we don't fight back, if we don't pour the money in, which we can ill afford. It won't be very long before this arrives on our doorstep.
Why is it only the UK that's coughed up $2.5 billion so far? France have apparently gone there today to pledge they'll do something. The EU seem to be squabbling over it. And I'm sorry, the Republicans in America are a disgrace, in my opinion, because they're not authorizing any more support.
One at a time. They're using a crucial issue, the Republicans, to play a political game, which may not be the smartest thing to do, because we're now at a crisis point. The Houthis, somebody said to me, let's wipe out the Houthis like Israel's going to do with Hamas. The Houthis are 10 times larger than Hamas. If this escalates, this is going to be tough. This could turn into a very serious war.
But to the point on money for Ukraine, briefly, because we've now got Heather on the line, so I want to go to her in a second. Why are the Americans holding up the money? What's going on in Congress there?
I think it's probably a reaction to the fact that old Joe Biden gave $6 billion to Iran.
Yeah, well, he gave a lot,
which is, frankly, directly connected, say many, to the 7th October atrocities. And I think that's what's holding them back.
But it's interesting, messages coming in, and the first one, when British interests are at stake, it is vital we are involved. We can't sit back and let others fight for us. It would be a dereliction of duty and a sign of weakness, says Amanda. Let's see what Heather has to say in Scotland. Hello, Heather. Thank you for calling. What can...
Hello. I've been listening to what both of you have been saying.
Yes.
Regarding to what America and what UK has been doing for Ukraine, There's something's got to give here, because we have pumped Ukraine with a lot of money, a lot of weapons, and now we're fighting in the Red Sea of our cargo ships and container ships and oil tanker ships. Yes, that needs to be done, because we need to get rid of these idiot people. The Houthis really are putting our country and America to ransom here. And this is the consequences of getting involved with Iran by making deals with them. It's talk about dancing with the devil itself.
Basically, we tried to buy them off, didn't we, with money and think they'd behave, and it's all come back to haunt us in a big way.
And this is there lies the consequences here by getting involved with countries like them.
Heather, do you mention money as well? I think you did. And the fact of the matter is, we've now given something like 12 billion in support to Ukraine, including effectively, as you say, vital lethal aid. Would you row back on that, or do you support the fact?
Row back on Ukraine, because someone's got to give. Because look at our infrastructure of this country: poor housing, poor schools, bad NHS. We need every single money that counts to repair the mess of this good country of ours. This country used to be a good country, but look at us now. We are in a real bad situation.
OK, Heather, you've passionately put your view across. Thank you very much for that. Roger, Heather, she says row back on Ukraine because the money should be spent here, yet she's really thinks it's really important to continue the struggle down in the Yemen.
Yeah,
it's not a choice, though, is it?
She's right, but it's a balancing act every day, in the sense that I think the Ukraine probably comes behind the Red Sea. In the Red Sea, we are immediately threatened. They are cutting off our food and water and fuel, and we can't stand for that. So whatever that costs, we have to make that sacrifice. Ukraine needs to be analyzed a bit more carefully because it isn't as direct a threat.
OK, listen, coming up next, we'll have more from Roger, and we'll be talking about a couple of other things that I want to go into. We've been talking about the strikes in Yemen. We've touched on what we're talking about, the support for Zelensky. I want to talk a little bit about the economy as well, because on the face of it, this is the Nick Dubois forecast, which have not actually been that sound in the past. It looks to me as if the UK, having been predicted in 2023 by that magnificent institution, the Bank of England, that never gets anything wrong, that we would go into recession. We avoided it. It looks like, I think it's fair to say, judging by the monthly figures that came out, I think it was yesterday, we will probably narrowly avoid going into recession, certainly for the first half of this year and the second half of the year. And Rishi Sunak's whole tactic, his argument now is, things are getting better, don't put it at risk with Labour. Does a changing economy, perhaps a more stable, perhaps even a slightly growing economy, is that enough to make you think, do you know what, I might stick with the devil I know? 0344 499 1000. But I'm also asking you, and keep these calls coming, I'm going to take some more because they're already here, how involved should the UK be in global conflict? 0344 499 1000, or tweet me at Nick Dubois at TalkTV.
The highest art is beautiful, breathtaking, timeless, and moving. Experience art with 5,000 years of history, inspired by the divine. Experience Shenyun.
The RNIB Accord is our stylish new portable audio companion. It looks and feels just like a Bluetooth speaker, and it also incorporates all of the accessible design features that you would expect, such as tactile buttons and voice prompts.
Volume up.
Visit rnib.org.uk/shop or give us a call on 0303 123 9999.
We're here!
Thanks for joining us.
You're with TalkTV, on TV, on radio, online.
We're on your smart speaker as well.
Criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn.
Do you know what I love about Talk Today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. I rather like David Cameron. I don't sort of bear him any ill will because he delivered the referendum that he said he would deliver.
The Tories love a scrap. You can almost see this coming round the tracks with Suella Braverman. She's heading up one side and Rishi Sunak the other.
The police are pro-Palestine. That is just not right. You swear an oath in the police to act without fear or favour.
The COVID inquiry seems to have turned into a sort of pantomime. There's not really any substance to it.
It's hard to know whether it's a farce or a tragedy.
The amount of time it's taken, the number of illegal migrants currently sent by us to Rwanda, zilch. The amount of money it's cost, we're saying, what are we saying it's cost?
About 140 million.
140 million pounds so far. So 140 million pounds, so far result nil, absolutely nil.
Are we only going to be trusting sources like Meta and Google? Where is our unbiased news going to come from?
Calais in winter is cold.
That is from the Jeremy Corbyn book.
Kevin O'Sullivan is the worst presenter on Talk TV, sitting on his fat arse talking for a living.
If you're walking towards me and you're a vegan, you should have a great big orange sticker over here saying, "Watch out, vegans about."
The weirdest plank that we've had in 3 years. Hundreds and hundreds of mice in a box, which he walked into a branch of McDonald's. McMouseman.
McMouseman, yeah.
McMouseman.
He should be easy enough to catch, this guy, shouldn't he? I mean, he's got a house full of mice.
This is a major summit.
President Biden decided this was important after watching a Tom Cruise film.
Sunak and the current Conservative government are not conservative.
Why don't you leave that party and come to one that actually shares your ideology?
This has been a party political broadcast on behalf of the Reform UK Party.
Hi, Ofcom.
Kids think all they have to do is take pictures of everything.
Just shut down TikTok. Problem solved.
This is really unfair.
What's unfair?
If it's on camera, we're not doing the interview.
Yes, I'm going to do.
You're going to resign?
Yes, because I cannot continue my work. When I say I am God, I'm not joking.
Did you feel Elvis was controlling?
I've been answering your question, you answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. Are you prepared to call Hamas a terror group?
Is it possible to have a rational
discussion? You can't, can you? I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
Talk TV. It's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that. Lots of messages coming in, and as I say, I will get to your calls as well, but more from Roger first. Let me just read a couple of these. Nick, why can we use the Navy for the Red Sea, but not the English Channel, turning the boats back, says Henrietta. Nick, people who don't think we should be involved in Ukraine have conveniently forgotten that in 1994, the UK was a signatory to the Budapest Memorandum, whereby we guaranteed the security of Ukraine's borders and its sovereignty in exchange for giving up its nuclear weapons. Somebody needs to remind the US president of that, says Mitch. Of course, that's absolutely right, what that agreement was about, and look how well that worked. I mean, you know, I'm sure they regret in a way giving up nuclear weapons and having been invaded subsequently. Roger, we could talk about that, but I'm going to read this message out because it says ask Roger, okay? So it says ask Roger why Biden would send billions to Ukraine but also take Texas to court to stop it closing the US southern border. Biden, who chose to conflate Ukraine and homeland security, that is. Don't the Republicans have a duty to question his motives in protecting a border thousands of miles away, Ukraine, while exposing his own country to millions of illegals, says Chris in Newbury. Chris, I've done my job. Roger, what say you?
It's an excellent question. I think the answer is that, and I certainly heard this over and over and over again when I was in America the other day. A lot of people are criticizing Biden, and the Biden supporters whom I spoke with, they seemed a bit bruised over this, is that Biden has shot down everything that Trump did that was good in order that Trump not get credit. So we wouldn't have a Gaza because the Abraham Accords would have been signed within a matter of weeks, apparently.
They were.
The Arab world and Israel would have united in those accords, and the stick would have been taken away from Hamas.
Well, that's some people think that's why they launched the attack.
To stop it happening, absolutely. And that's all part of Putin's plan and Iran's plan, and it succeeded. And Biden went along with it because he didn't want Trump getting the credit, because that would strengthen him in the coming election. Secondly, the border is that there are 4 or 5 issues like this where Biden scotched things, killed things that Trump had done so that Trump didn't get the credit. The second biggie is the border issue. And there again,
You're talking about the border in
the
America,
Texas border,
Ukraine.
the American border, the Republicans certainly are questioning this and pushing back at the same time as they're trying to indict him in what they're now calling, in so many places in America, the Biden crime family.
Huntergate or something.
Huntergate, the Biden crime family, the laptop, the whole thing. It really is, there are some tremendous winds and storms going on over there. And our caller is quite right. The Texas border is absolutely one of them.
And you would say, so they are, to answer Chris's question, the Republicans are going at it. Right, before I take my next call, which will take us back to this subject. Okay, I know what you're going to say. I'm going to deliberately wind you up here. Rishi Sunak, he's avoided recession. Brilliant, wonderful thing. He hasn't got growth. He's probably, it looks like he's got a better chance now of avoiding recession in 24, 25 is predicted for growth. The EU, Germany in recession, they're not having such a good time over there. We should be grateful and on our knees to Rishi Sunak, shouldn't we, Roger? Choose your words carefully. I have a button here, okay?
I have been saying for over a year since the first interest rate rise, firstly, that we do not have consumer-driven inflation as they do in the States. Our inflation is driven, really, as you can see, recently by food and energy, and it's going to happen even more now with the things. The things we're discussing. You cannot combat that kind of inflation, which is called cost push, by raising interest rates. All you do
But
is...
he has no control over that. That's what the Bank of England do, isn't it?
I think the Treasury and Rishi have some sway with the Bailey-Oceros and his thick-skinned colleagues who won't listen to anybody. 14 interest rate rises did nothing to curb the inflation. Cost push always falls by itself. That's what happened. At the same time as I predicted this, I predicted that Rishi, Andrew Bailey, and Jeremy Hunt would all claim credit for it. They have nothing whatsoever to do with it. Fine, that's great. If he wants to claim that he's saved the economy, that's wonderful.
Well,
but
actually, funny enough, as someone who spent 25 years in business, I would say it was the robustness of British business that did more. I mean, truthfully, they have done well, British business, haven't they?
It was the robustness of British business despite being suffocated by taxes and increases. The third thing I predicted was the corporation tax increase, and that they were building up, given that we've got the highest taxes in 70 years, a war chest to give away to save their skin before the next general election. And that's exactly what we're starting to see now.
Although, to be fair, Roger, there are lots of governments that like to suddenly find money behind the national sofa in the run-up to an election, so they stand guilty as charged.
I didn't accuse them of being imaginative, did I?
No, you didn't, and that's very well put, as ever. Right, we've got time to take a call from Kevin in Nottinghamshire. Kevin, hello.
Hello.
Thanks for calling, Kevin. Over to you.
Basically, as far as sending more money to Ukraine, we have to look at what is it going to achieve. And all it's going to achieve is more death. Right from the beginning, people were sold this idea that Russia was going to lose. They were fighting with shovels. They run out of fuel. Second largest petroleum exporter in the world. and it's achieved nothing but hundreds of thousands of people who are dead. Now, it's all very well people saying, all right, let's give them some more money to keep fighting. We're not there on the front line.
That's a very good point, Kevin. Let me ask Roger just to comment on that, if I may. We're not combatants, so it's easy for us to say, give more money.
Yeah, I completely sympathize with that. But the problem is, as I said, we're going to be next.
No, that's...
You know, whatever he does...
sorry to intervene, but
no, go ahead.
On one hand, we're told that Russia's losing. Russia's got rubbish equipment, etc., etc. They're not even in the main part of Russia. They're in Donbass, in the Russian areas. They haven't tried to take all of Ukraine. They actually said that they had no intention of taking all of Ukraine. They just wanted to protect the Russian speakers.
But that's still not legitimate, though, Kevin. That's the sort of thing that diplomacy should deal with. You don't just invade your country on that basis.
Why wasn't a referendum allowed? Why won't the West accept a referendum for the people who live there to decide?
Well, it's not up to the West. It's up to Ukraine, isn't it?
Well, then let's take Taiwan.
Sorry?
Taiwan's a part of China, but we back Taiwan against...
I don't think Taiwan would agree with you there.
And they're not taking our money.
The people in the Donbass haven't had a chance. I think most people in the Donbass would actually side with Russia, and the West knows that.
Well, look, if I can just...
Let Roger come back to you, Kevin.
If I can just jump in, Kevin, I think it's how you view things. It's either that Mr. Putin is a nice man who just wants his Russian republics back, and he'll stop there. But on the other hand, you can see the gentleman with Iran and China fomenting everything that's going on in Gaza, in Yemen, and why in the world would you believe that he's going to stop just at Ukraine?
Well, haven't we actually pushed him into bed with those people?
Of course he's in bed with those people.
Allies.
Of course he's in bed with those people.
But you have to remember that this started in 2014.
When the West sat back and did nothing.
Sorry?
When the West sat back and did nothing, Kevin.
Exactly.
That's something we should learn from this. Sure.
Exactly.
When the people of the Donbass were under attack from Ukraine.
Well, no, I'm talking about Crimea. Yeah. Sorry, I thought you were referring to Crimea.
Well, so did I. Well, if you want to go to Crimea, who liberated Crimea from the Turks? The Russians.
Well, okay, we won't go that far back. We'll be talking about Catherine the Great next.
Because Khrushchev in 1957 decided to hand those places over.
Kevin, listen, I don't want to go back that far in history. I hope you feel you've had a good say on that. Thank you for your view. People will agree with Kevin, I suspect, as well. Look, Roger, I mean, his legitimate sort of query was, we're saying this is a threat to freedom, this is the threat to the West. He's saying he's just going to limit it to his borders, as if that's okay, to expand his borders into sovereign territories to reclaim Russia. Kevin's kind of implying that's okay. It's not really, is it?
Well, I mean, if it were true, it would be okay, but the problem is that we don't know that it's true.
Would it be okay? No, seriously? Because, I mean, surely self-determination is what should happen.
Sure.
Okay, fine. We'll agree on that score. Right, whilst we're in lots of you calling in, I am asking this question, how involved should the UK be in global conflict? Lots of views coming in. As ever, I'm always so impressed with your willingness to discuss these things and share your views. Let's go to Karen in Bournemouth. Hello, Karen.
Oh, good afternoon, Nick.
Lovely to hear from you. I've got Roger here with me. What would you like to say?
Hi, Roger. Well,
Hi.
I think the decisions on the supporting democracies are quite often made by... Sorry for the dog.
That's all right. We won't interview him. We'll talk to you.
Yeah, I don't know. She makes a lot more sense than me most of the time. But when you know the whole Russia thing kicked off in February, we didn't give them what they needed. We gave them what would keep our industrial arms complex monies going. Well, that's my opinion anyway. I'm not sure if it's but it's they were screaming for planes. They were, screaming for bits and pieces.
It is true. They were screaming for quite a lot of things. And there was a huge, if I'm right, Roger, correct me, I think Karen's point is right, that there was they wanted to limit it to defensive capability, not offensive capability that was given to Ukraine, wasn't it?
Well, that's part of it, but also they wouldn't have been able to fly the planes.
They weren't trained, were they?
They weren't
trained.
Okay,
let's bring Karen back in. Sorry, Karen, I just wanted to clarify that.
But hadn't Poland offered them the planes that they could fly? And Biden put the kibosh
Yeah,
on
he
it.
did. No, I think you're absolutely right there. I'm happy to be corrected. There was a willingness by the neighbouring states to literally be a middleman, for want of a better word, to do it. But what's your point about this? Is it that this is more of a mess because of the West involvement, or that they've not been as forthcoming as they should be?
Well, I think if they're going to make the decisions to, they look at it from the wrong angles. They're either going to defend something or they're not. But what they're doing is looking at, well, if we do this, this will help our financial state. And it just drags out.
That's quite cynical if you think it's just to help the military arms complex. That's very cynical.
Oh, I apologise. Didn't I tell you I was completely...
No, it doesn't mean you're wrong, Karen, by any means. Don't get me wrong. But I was actually, and maybe I'm just a bit old-fashioned here, I was quite proud of the British response to Ukraine.
I think it was quite altruistic in part.
Were you not?
But, I mean, that's the problem for some it is, but when it comes to the people that are making the big decisions, then they look at their own situation as a protection kind of thing, but at the same time they need to still look like they're doing something.
Except
like this jiu-jitsu and the post.
Oh yeah.
Well, everybody's running around pretending to do something and nothing's getting done.
Well, I'm going to be talking about that at the top of the hour in the context of how government's reaction to major miscarriages of justice through our institutions. And I don't mean this government. I could go back decades, all governments, including this government.
Oh, God,
the first line of defence is do nothing, protect their interests, and not those who've been on the miscarriage of justice. Karen, you're taking me down a road I'm not prepared to go to yet, but I will be doing that with Roger shortly. And then at the top of the hour, I've got and thank you for your call, Karen, I've got a very interesting moment, because I'm actually going to be in praise of Stephen Flynn, leader of the SNP, on this issue about our failure to get to grips with institutional miscarriages of justice. So if you can bear with me, and whilst we won't be talking in great praise of Stephen Flynn, he will kick off our discussion about that. I'm just going to read a few messages before going to the... actually, no, I've got time just to go to Susan in Manchester. Let's go to Susan. Hello, Susan.
Hi, Nick.
Hello, you'd like to talk about the Red Sea?
Yes. It's a bit of a different take on it. I've spoken to you before. You're very lovely.
Oh, thank you. Oh, you can call any time, Susan. I remember now, so thank you.
Yeah. Basically, I suffer very badly with anxiety and depression.
Okay.
But I still feel I have to watch to, see what's going on.
Bad news, yes.
Yeah. And it is so scary, obviously, for everybody. But if you multiply it by 1,000, that's how it makes me and people in my position feel.
So your anxiety, you know it's not good for you to watch these things, but you need to know.
But you have to, yeah.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah,
I can understand that.
But the doctors have had to double my medicine since all this carry on. And it's just so frightening. You just think, oh, God, on our doorstep. And I actually rang my local MP, who is Conservative.
Who's that? Do you know? Can you remember their name?
Oh, God, no, I
No,
can't.
don't worry.
Sorry.
Don't worry.
And this is when Russia started, with Russia and Ukraine. And I said, we haven't got any air raid shelters. And they said, oh, well, we don't.
Okay.
It's not happened yet. And I said, but
well, it's a bit late then.
Too late when it's happened.
So you are genuinely very concerned, Susan, that one of these, they can escalate in two ways. We can have an increase in terror attacks or a conventional military intervention. That's what worrying you. Just bear with me, Susan. Roger, I kind of get where Susan's coming from on this. It must be extremely worrying for people in similar circumstances.
I get it totally, absolutely. And I talk about this all the time. Pardon me. Let me try to offer you maybe some few words of comfort, Susan. First of all, this goes on around us all the time. Do you know, it's been said that there isn't a nation on this planet that wasn't established by an act of war. So, unfortunately, people are always fighting each other. There are always wars. There are always things going on. I'm looking at a television monitor here in the studio with the Palestine demonstration going on for the umpteenth time today. What has these hundreds of thousands of people around the world out in the streets is people are so frightened as you are. You're not alone, Susan. Just imagine this. This is what I keep saying. Imagine if we had television and social media when the United Kingdom was bombing Dresden in Germany without regard to collateral damage or citizens, blowing up every building and every human being around. And even worse, imagine if you saw nightly reports, as you do particularly on our mainstream stations, of America dropping the atomic bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. What would that look like?
I think Roger's giving some context there. I hope he's not making your anxiety worse. But it is, I suppose, Susan, the message is that, you know, there's a lot of this going around on the world, and it has not led to Armageddon.
And I was going to say, you don't have to watch it.
Susan, does that share any comfort to you before we go to the break?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's just so sad, the hatred as well in the world.
It's very toxic at the moment, and I don't like it at all.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Sure. Bless you.
Pleasure.
Thank you. That was Susan in Manchester. Coming up afterwards, we're going to talk a little bit about the post office and the angle I want to take, which is really this institutional failure. But Roger, I'm going to leave you with this to ponder over the break. Why do our MPs find it so hard to say sorry? And boy, there is really no better of example when these institutions need to say sorry than the post office scandal. 03444 499 1000. How involved should the UK be in global conflict? You can tweet me at Nick Dubois or at TalkTV.
So what is ClickUp? ClickUp is an all-in-one productivity software where you can manage everything and anything related to your work. Your documents, your chats, your whiteboards, your projects. The value of this, you don't have to buy 5 softwares to do this. You don't have to be hopping back and forth between multiple tabs, trying to find that email from a year ago. Instead, you can find everything in a matter of seconds, keeping your work and everything related to productivity organized in a single place.
We're here.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with TalkTV, on TV, on radio,
online. Put on your smart speaker as well.
Criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn.
Do you know what I love about Talk Today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. I rather like David Cameron. I don't sort of bear him any ill will because he delivered the referendum that he said he would deliver.
The Tories love a scrap. You can almost see this coming round the tracks with Suella Braverman. She's heading up one side and Rishi Sunak the other.
The police are pro-Palestine.
That is just not right. You swear an oath in the police to act without fear or favour.
The COVID inquiry seems to have turned into a sort of pantomime. There's not really any substance to it.
It's hard to know whether it's a farce or a tragedy. For the amount of time it's taken, the number of illegal migrants currently sent by us to Rwanda, zilch. The amount of money it's cost, we're saying, what are we saying it's cost?
About 140 million.
140 million pounds so far. So 140 million pounds, so far result nil, absolutely nil.
Are we only going to be trusting sources like Meta and Google? Where is our unbiased news going to come from?
Calais in winter is cold.
That That is from the Jeremy Corbyn book.
Kevin O'Sullivan is the worst presenter on Talk TV, sitting on his fat arse talking for a living.
If you're walking towards me and you're a vegan, you should have a great big orange sticker over here saying, "Watch out, vegans about."
The weirdest plank that we've had in, 3 years? Hundreds and hundreds of mice in a box, which he walked into a branch of McDonald's. McMouse Man.
McMouse Man, yeah.
McMouse Man.
It should be easy enough to catch this guy, shouldn't he? I mean, he's got a house full of mice.
This is a major summit.
President Biden decided this was important after watching a Tom Cruise film.
Sunak and the current Conservative government are not Conservative.
Why don't you leave that party and come to one that actually shares your ideology?
This has been a party political broadcast on behalf of the Reform UK Party.
Hi, Ofcom.
Kids think all they have to do is take pictures of everything.
Just shut down TikTok. Problem solved.
This is really unfair.
What's unfair?
If it's on camera, we're not doing the interview.
Yes, I'm going to do.
You're going to resign?
Yes, because I cannot continue my work. When I say I am God, I'm not joking.
Did you feel Elvis was controlling?
I've been answering your question, you answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. Are you prepared to call Hamas a terror group?
Is it possible to have a rational
discussion? You can't, can you? I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
Talk TV. It's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that.
And welcome back. Just read some messages. This is from Carl in Derbyshire. Nick, I'm terrified that our biggest friend, ally and protector is not seemingly at the races. Joe Biden is talking about here. Since Biden came to power, the US has become an even bigger woke basket case than we are. With the world's policemen, the US, currently away with the fairies, all the rogue states and terrorist groups are exploiting this weakness. The Western world needs a strong America. Get rid of Biden and his puppeteers. Well, that may very well happen, but not to November. Biden is not drawing any love at the moment. Just very briefly, will he be the Democratic candidate?
It's certainly possible. He may be replaced, but it's looking pretty likely that he will stay. The British bookies, who over hundreds of years, as you know, Nick, are rarely wrong, or I guess they wouldn't still be in business.
Indeed.
They've got Trump on about a 30% lead. I know President Trump. I met him in Florida the other day and spoke to him, and he reckons he's on about a 30% lead. He's feeling very confident.
Biden, will they dump him?
It's very hard to tell. It's possible it could happen any moment, or not at all.
He could have a President Johnson moment and take illness.
He could indeed, but he is basically President Obama's, I should say for our viewers in America, a president or an ambassador retains that title for
forever,
life.
Don't they?
So
Yes,
he is President Biden's third term. And I don't think Obama wants to lose that.
Okay, all right. Now, listen, you will know, and many of our viewers and listeners will know, that on the background to the post office scandal, Ed Davey, Sir Ed Davey, knighted, leader of the Liberal Democrats, who constantly calls for people's resignation over seemingly endless things, has rightly been called out for making bad decisions and not pushing the case of the post office sub-postmasters and mistresses. Do you call them mistresses? I have no idea.
Yes.
And when he was in fact responsible for the post office. Now, he has refused to apologise. It's quite embarrassing, actually, and I'll play it later in the show. There's basically 10 times he refused to say sorry. What is it about politicians, do you think, that means they can't say sorry when it's so obvious he should say sorry?
I don't know. You're a politician who became a broadcaster.
Yeah, I was apologising all the time.
Yeah. I don't know. And I wouldn't generalize. I wouldn't say that most politicians are that way. But certainly in Ed Davey's case, it's worse than that. He actually says he was lied to. He didn't know.
Yeah, he blamed everyone else but himself.
The buck stops with him. He's the post office minister, for goodness sake. It's the lamest excuse imaginable. And I mean, the socials are replete with people screaming for his knighthood to be handed back like Venables.
I know we do. Well,
CBE.
you know, I'm probably going to annoy people here, but I was lucky enough to be awarded a CBE, and I actually felt the fact that Venables had one and was pushed into giving it back, devalued it immediately. I just felt, now I didn't get mine for political services or being a mate of Boris Johnson's or something like that, which I'm not, by the way, and I'm happy to explain one day why I got it, but the reality is giving back your CBE costs you nothing except a loss of dignity and humiliation. I mean, she's a chief executive who needs to be held to account as much as Ed Davis.
Not a single person involved in this has received any kind of serious punishment.
Do it in America. Do politicians apologise if they get things wrong? I suspect not.
Probably the same. About some do, some don't. But I mean, this is like the financial crisis credit crunch of 11, 12 years ago. Not a single person responsible has had their hand slapped.
Oh, someone had their knighthood taken away, didn't they? The Bank of Scotland guy, I think it was.
Fred,
or maybe Royal Bank. Fred
the Shred.
Fred the Shred. Godwin, something like that.
Fred Goodwin.
You know, it is extraordinary. I mean, this is Bill in Sussex. He says, great show, Nick, thank you. Of course, you're right. No one in the world says sorry. I think they believe if they apologise, they are then legally admitting guilt and so are liable to be sued. Look, there's bound to be some truth in that, a lot of truth in that, but a politician is actually different. I don't think you can sue a politician. You can sue the office of the politician, which is slightly different if you're a minister. But he showed poor judgment. He made a bad call. Now, I know the pressures that ministers are under, and they're called to make a huge number of decisions in a day, and the easy thing to do is just whatever your officials tell you. But when something doesn't smell right, when you've got evidence that says, you know, there's a lot of complaints about, but nothing to see here, Minister, and you are above all meant to be a Liberal Democrat who always claims to be fighting for the little people, you have to have stamina and push back against your officials and say, I'm not happy. I want to have a meeting to find out what went on. I think that's what he's guilty of, appalling judgment. He should at least apologise. I got this wrong. Bad call. Sincerest apologies to everyone who's got caught up in this.
Well, absolutely. But I mean, it goes beyond that, because this is beyond incompetence. This is active wrongdoing. I mean, these people were prosecuted by the post office under a commission arrangement. Can you imagine if the fraud squad got a commission for every commission? I mean, it's insane. Now, for him to say that he was unaware of this is gross misconduct by a chief executive, as far as I'm concerned.
You would be
personally.
fired in any other job.
You would be fired. You would be sued. You asked me about in America. I mean, I've lived here, you know, half of my life, but I still, you know what goes on in America. You would receive such sanctions. It's amazing, but one scandal after another here, everybody just gets
It's a revolving door.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Joshua in Southampton. Hello, Joshua. Hello. Over to you.
Hello.
Far away, Joshua. The airwaves are all yours.
Yeah, I know before that you did talk about, I know Rishi Sunak is planning to pump £2.6 billion into Ukraine.
Indeed.
I disagree that is the wrong time, because I do believe that money should be pumped into other services within the United Kingdom. Because I have heard on the local news, especially not just in Hampshire way, but in other parts of the country, such as Dorset and Essex, youth services are shutting down. And I think that money should be spent on building new facilities for for youth services, building new buildings, and the money should be found to find new land instead of the council taking it over and saying that you can't run youth services anymore. So I do believe that 2.6 billion could be used for that. I think it should be used also for fixing local infrastructure.
Okay. Joshua, that's a perfectly legitimate point. You've made it very well. I think a choice has been made, if you like, and obviously you disagree with that choice. Roger, what do you say to Joshua?
May I ask you, Joshua, if we forget Ukraine and a similar amount were required to repel the Houthi reaction that is certainly going to come to the attacks in which we participated, and things escalate, and either to defend ourselves in an escalating war or to try to ensure that it doesn't turn into an escalating war, we had to spend that $2.6 billion. How would you feel about that, sir?
Well, I think if there was no other choice, we may have to spend that. But I'm not sure how the cost is justified at $2 billion. Maybe $1 billion.
Well, we've done $12 billion in total supporting them since the invasion. And to put my masts in the ground, I actually support this decision. I'm just disappointed we are a front runner and other countries aren't doing more. But Joshua, to give you context, in total, I think it's about $12 billion today in if you like, equipment and money.
Yeah, I mean, the decision of whether it's $1 billion or 2 or 2.6 or whatever is not in the hands of any of the three of us. That's just what the experts are going to come up with the cost is. The question is, do you see that as different than Ukraine and something that in the national interest we need to do?
I think for some people it may be in the national interest and for other people it's not. For some people, they don't think that we should get involved in Ukraine within the war. For other people, it may be part of the national interest.
I'm talking about the Red Sea now, not Ukraine.
Yeah. Would you spend the money on the Red Sea because it's perhaps to you, perhaps not, more obviously in the national interest, Joshua?
I probably would spend the money on the Red Sea if it was the last resort, yes, and we would have no other choice.
Okay. Listen, Joshua, thank you for that. Thought-provoking. Do you agree with Joshua? 03444 999 1000. How involved should the UK be in global conflict? And, of course, we're focusing very much on Yemen, where there's been military intervention and cost, of course, and Ukraine, where there's been sustained involvement, leadership in many ways by the UK. Nick, Ed Davies should resign and be stripped of his knighthood. He failed to listen or even look into the post office scandal. Instead, he just accepted what he was told without bothering to check. That is the failing. That is my view. That's from Barry in North Yorkshire.
And he even refused to meet with them.
On the advice of officials. Yeah. Well, officials are going to do their best to stop you uncovering something, Minister. That should not be a shock. And I think that's what I find slightly disturbing about this. Nick, when you are speaking about injustices shortly, please don't forget to mention the WASPy women who have and are still suffering because of DWP maladministration. Pauline, I actually mentioned them right at the beginning. They were in my list, and I'm absolutely conscious that that is an institutional failing where, if you like, you must feel that there's been a huge miscarriage of fairness there, amongst other things, which I think we can all agree on. Now, coming up at the next hour, I'm going to be playing a clip from the leader of the SNP, not because he's the leader of the SNP, but it's about the post office. And I think what he is pointing to is exactly this point that Pauline's just touched on, how there is there is institutional resistance to uncovering the truth, despite there being so obvious miscarriages of justice or prima facie clear unfairness in the way people are being treated. And I'm talking about government inquiries into things like Primados, something I got involved in, a sort of, they call it the next thalidomide scandal. Obviously the post office, which I'm continuing to take your views on. And I actually want to explore, though, why, if you like, this bastion of democracy, as I like to think we are, when it comes to defending the interests of its citizens, it basically defends the interests of the institutions. Roger.
That is the question. I mean, the whole system is dysfunctional. You can see it on every level. I'm very focused today on the horrendous things that I've read about private prosecutions. Now, the post office is a great example. I believe that they've had the authority, as have a number of other British institutions, to conduct their own police-like private prosecutions, and that goes back, in the case of the post office, 300 years.
Yeah, I know, it's extraordinary. I don't think anyone knew this apart from the post office.
Now, these institutions do not have the training, the technical, the investigative, the protective, the everything you need to be a police officer. They can't operate in the same way.
Well, they
as the
get
police.
bonuses for prosecuting.
And in the post office, at least, I don't know about I don't want to defame other institutions. I don't know about them, but it has certainly been said with the post office, I mean, it's vomitory that people are paid.
Did you say vomitory?
I did.
Oh, you're a minefield of new language.
Thank
what was
you.
the other one? The Bailey Ossosaurus.
Bailey Ossosaurus.
Talking about Andrew Bailey.
The
Bailey Ossosaurus.
yes.
I mean, it's extraordinary.
It is incredible that that the post office would be paying bribes, commissions to people to convict people. But what I found is that in the last 10 years, due to cuts and the inability of the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, to be overwhelmed, the number of private prosecutions has increased. And it's gotten to such an extent that in the case of the post office, prosecutions were handed to them and they just went ahead and put the people in jail.
Well, Roger, listen, you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you very much for joining me this hour and taking calls. Very good-spirited of you. Not only will we be talking about the injustices of the post office and institutional cover-up, let's call it what it is, I'm also going to be looking at Labour embracing the nanny state. Now, we can all talk about toothbrushing, of course, and I'm happy to do that, but the reality is, in an age when most people, when something goes wrong in their lives, go, what's the government going to do about it? Maybe Labour are right. People want more of the nanny state. 0344 499 1000.
This is TalkTV.
3, 2, 1. Go ground.
This, my friends, is Talk Today with me, Jeremy Kyle.
And me, Nicola Thorpe.
I'm going to teach you the 7 secrets of great public speaking. I've worked with over 100,000 people in 53 countries around the world. I'm going to teach you how to drive your message in ways that you could never imagine. I'm Richard Green, and this is my BBC Maestro course on public speaking and communication.
We're here.
Thanks for joining us.
You're with Talk TV, on TV,
on radio, online.
Put on your smart speaker as well.
Criminals using XL bully dogs as weapons to threaten others.
No matter how well trained, most dog owners will tell you a dog can turn. Do you know what I love about Talk Today? We do it all. Sunak, Suella, scones. I rather like David Cameron. I don't sort of bear him any ill will because he delivered the referendum that he said he would deliver.
The Tories love a scrap. You can almost see this coming round the tracks with Suella Braverman. She's heading up one side and Rishi Sunak the other.
The police are pro-Palestine.
That is just not right. You swear an oath in the police to act without fear or favour.
The COVID inquiry seems to have turned into a sort of pantomime. There's not really any substance to it.
It's hard to know whether it's a farce or a tragedy. The amount of time it's taken, the number of illegal migrants currently sent by us to Rwanda, zilch. The amount of money it's cost, what are we saying it's cost?
About 140 million.
140 million pounds so far. So 140 million pounds, so far result nil, absolutely nil.
Are we only going to be trusting sources like Meta and Google? Where is our unbiased news going to come from?
Calais in winter is cold.
That is from the Jeremy Corbyn book.
Kevin O'Sullivan is the worst presenter on Talk TV, sitting on his fat arse talking for a living.
If you're walking towards me and you're a vegan, you should have a great big orange sticker over here saying, "Watch out, vegans about."
The weirdest plank that we've had in 3 years. Hundreds and hundreds of mice in a box, which he walked into a branch of McDonald's. McMouseman.
McMouseman, yeah.
McMouseman.
It should be easy enough to catch this guy, shouldn't he? I mean, he's got a house full of mice.
This is a major summit.
President Biden decided this was important after watching a Tom Cruise film.
Sunak and the current Conservative government are not conservative.
Why don't you leave that party and come to one that actually shares your ideologies?
This has been a party political broadcast on behalf of the Reform UK Party.
Hi, Ofcom.
Kids think all they have to do is take pictures of everything.
Just shut down TikTok. Problem solved.
This is really unfair.
What's unfair? If it's on camera, we're not doing the interview.
Yes, I'm going to do.
You're going to resign?
Yes, because I cannot continue my work. When I say I am God, I'm not joking.
Did you feel Elvis was controlling?
I've been answering your question, you answer mine.
It's actually not my job to answer your questions. Are you prepared to call Hamas a terror group?
Is it possible to have a rational discussion
can you?
with you?
I've asked you two questions. Should Hamas stay in power and are they a terror group? You're refusing to answer either of them. That is very telling.
Talk TV. It's the only place where you get the truth.
You've done a book on poetry. Poetry and music for the many. I love poetry. We can agree on that.
Welcome back. We've got a very busy 2-hour session coming up for you. The first hour, I'm going to be talking about, I think, one of the